Good morning, our audience. Thank you for attending our webinar today. And we are pleased to have Dr. Robin Mann, the head of the Center for Organizational Excellence in New Zealand, and also the chairman of Global Benchmarking Networking. Good morning, Dr. Robin.
Good morning.
Yeah, I will leave the floor for you to start the webinar for our audience.
Hey, thank you very much indeed. You're all here to learn about benchmarking, so you're in the right place. So my presentation is benchmarking, learning from best practices. Just so you know, I lead the Center for Organizational Excellence Research. I actually visit the UAE many times. I'm actually in the United Arab Emirates at the moment, so do some work on the executive program for benchmarking for the Dubai government. But my organization is based in New Zealand, as you can see on this map. Certainly, if you come to New Zealand, you're welcome to look me up. I'd love to show you around. So I'm originally from the UK, but the centre was, I moved to New Zealand 26 years ago, and then started the centre through a university. And now the centre is totally independent of the university, apart from we still have a relationship with a number of PhD students. So this is the work we do. We do work on helping organisations to learn from best practices. And the whole reason for that is to help organisations on a journey to excellence. So all our activities are helping organizations to find best practices, and the most appropriate way to do that is for utilizing benchmarking. So we are the founders of the Trade Best Practice Benchmarking Methodology. We also have a website resource which all members of the Dubai Quality Group can access, called the BPR.com resource, the Best Practice Improvement Resource. And we also run the International Best Practice Competition, which is more of an informal way to encourage organizations to share best practices. All of these things I'm going to talk about later on, because they're all related to learning best practices, helping organizations to pursue excellence. So my presentation will be on these areas. I'll describe what benchmarking is, describe why benchmarking is the most powerful change management methodology there is. I'll provide an overview of the Trade Best Practice Benchmarking Methodology, present the BPR.com website resource, and also introduce the International Best Practice Competition, which is a really exciting event that encourages organizations to share their best practices. So actually, before I talk about what is benchmarking, I think it's important to acknowledge that benchmarking itself is a tool. And so if you go to your CEO, senior directors, and just say, we want to do benchmarking, you probably won't have that much success really in encouraging them to follow that path, because benchmarking is just a tool. The reason why you're doing benchmarking is to find best practices. So instead, if you go to your CEO, senior directors, and say, look, do you want to find best practices? Do you want to find ways that we can improve our business processes by introducing the latest approaches? They're more likely to be very supportive of that. So when I talk to senior executives, I always focus on, do they want to learn about best practices? And then I'd say, well, the best way of doing that is through benchmarking. So I just want to talk about what is a best practice before I talk about what is benchmarking. So this term best practice as well is quite subjective. It's interpreted in different ways by different people. And this is mainly because when you break up the word best practice, the word best is very subjective. Best means different things to different people. It can mean winner of a contest. It could mean the fastest. It could mean innovative. It could mean the first. It could mean the prettiest. It could mean the cheapest. So this is why you really need to qualify what do you mean by a best practice. So when I think about a best practice and how I define a best practice, it all relates back to the work of Dr. Robert Camp, who was a pioneer in the benchmarking field, who made benchmarking popular around the world. Many people think I'm gradually morphing into Dr. Robert Camp, but at the moment I don't wear a bow tie like him. But I do know Robert extremely well. So Robert is the honorary lifetime president of the Global Benchmarking Network, and he's been in that for over 20 odd years. And at the same time, I've been the chairman of the Global Benchmarking Network for a similar amount of time. And when he talks about benchmarking, he talks about the history of benchmarking from his work at Xerox. So if you go back to the early 1980s, Xerox were in danger of going out of business. They'd seen a market share drop from something like 85% of the world's market share for copier machines down to 17% due to the competition from the Far East and Korea, Japan. And the organization was either going to go out of business or they needed to transform how they undertook their business. And they got a new CEO in, and he basically said that they recognized that they couldn't compete with the competitors. It was costing them just as much to I think manufacture their products as their competitors were selling their products at. So it recognizes a huge challenge here. And then brainstorming how to address this, they sort of said, well, really every single process that we have could be improved. What would be the best way to, and is it feasible to really hone in and really make all of our processes the best that they can possibly be, and really keep an open mind on how to do that. And they decided, which is quite unusual at the time, to say, look, we're going to learn from the best organizations. Doesn't matter what industry they're from. We're going to learn from the best for every single process we have, whether it's a leadership process, HR process, whether it's customer service process, etc. And at the same time, they said, we're going to learn systematically. And this is where Dr. Robert Camp's team came in. They developed this methodology, the Xerox 10-step methodology. And over a period of about 8 years, they undertook over 200 benchmarking projects, across all areas of the business. So they're learning from organizations like Honda for supply development, Hewlett-Packard for research and development, American Express for financial control systems, DuPont for safety systems. So in a short period of time, they undertook over 200 benchmarking projects, and they really, which once all that new knowledge, new best practices combined, really elevated the performance of the whole organization. So much so that they started, as soon as these awards, like the Bordage Business Excellence Award was started and the EFQM Award was started, so Bordage in 1998, EFQM in 1992, they were the first winners of both of those awards. They transformed their organization from an organization in danger of going out of business to be world class. And this is how benchmarking became popular, because then every organization wanted to know what was responsible for this transformation. And when Dr. Robert Camp talks about benchmarking and best practices, he has this wonderful statement here that you can read. Hold on. It's difficult for me to read it. Hold on. There we are. What he says is there is no single best practice, because best is not best for everyone. Every organization is different in some way, different missions, cultures, environments, technologies. What is meant by best are those practices that have been shown to produce superior results, selected by a systematic process, and judged as exemplary good or successfully demonstrated. Best practices are then adapted to fit a particular organization. So this definition is very, very important. It says some very important things here. it says what is meant by best are those practices that have been shown to produce superior results, which implies some comparison and that one organization performing stronger than another. Selected by a systematic process, and that systematic process is benchmarking. So a structured approach to learning. Also judged as exemplary, good, or successfully demonstrated. So successfully demonstrated means it's not just a good idea, where the concept seems as though it makes sense. It also means that it's actually been used, it's been tried out, and it's actually delivered results. It also says judged as exemplary good, and this is when we're talking about potential peer review. Maybe the organization's had some acknowledgements, won some awards, or been audited, and it's shown this particular process is a standout process inside the organization. So this is really the definition of best practices that I go by. And what's interesting here is that he's also saying that best practices are then adapted to fit a particular organization, because every organization is different. Every organization is at a different stage of maturity. So it's never a straight copy and paste. So if we now come to what benchmarking is, then I like to split the word benchmarking into two parts. So you've got the benchmark and you've got the ing at the end. Because again, a lot of people just think benchmarking is comparison, and it's not. It's a whole process. So this is why it's useful to split the word into two. So the benchmark is the comparison aspect of benchmarking. It's a comparison against a standard or a point of reference. Therefore, comparison of one organization's performance metrics against another organization's performance metrics, and trying to find out, which organization has a higher level of performance, therefore is setting the benchmark. So the benchmark is important to do to find out how your practices or processes stand against others and whether there's an opportunity for improvement, but it doesn't give you solutions. So when you add the ing, this is really what benchmarking means to me. The most powerful part of benchmarking is the ing at the end, because the ing means that you're acting on that comparison data. It means you're going to take action and try and learn from other organizations that have higher levels of performance than you, and find out what they're doing differently, and then bring back those golden nuggets from these other organizations and think about how you can apply those to your own organization. So always think about the benchmarking with the ing. Therefore, it's not just comparison, it's learning from other organizations. And not just learning from them, it's thinking about how to apply that learning inside your organization and going ahead and implementing those better practices. So hopefully that helps. So for me, this is a simple definition of benchmarking. Benchmarking is learning from the experience of others and applying that knowledge to improve organizational performance. So whilst we had the Xerox methodology, then back 25 years ago, I developed the trade best practice benchmarking methodology, mainly because the Xerox methodology, even though it was available, you could only really, it was not that prescriptive. It was showing the major steps of the methodology, but not showing precisely what needed to be done inside each step. And so we developed the trade best practice benchmarking methodology originally for the New Zealand Benchmarking Club, and then it's been developed substantially since then. It was a big major improvement in the methodology was when it was used by the Singapore government, going back 10, 15 years, maybe 15 years. And the major iterations of the methodology more recently have been because of our work in the United Arab Emirates, particularly with the Dubai government. But the methodology can be used for public or private sector. It makes no difference. So the trade methodology is a benchmarking approach. As you can see here, it consists of 5 stages. All of these sort of stages with any methodology are roughly the same. But as you'll see later on, the trade methodology is a bit more prescriptive. Within each stage, there are a number of steps, and it goes into quite a lot of detail to make sure that you implement the methodology appropriately. To do benchmarking well, it's like being a good researcher. This is all that's required. This is what a methodology is training you to do. Training you to do good research, to find out what the best practices are, and then helping you to implement them. So the trade methodology consists of the terms of reference, therefore identifying, what is the opportunity inside your organization? What do you want to focus on? Who should be part of your benchmarking team? Because normally there's a team involved in benchmarking. Not necessarily so, it could be done by one person, but normally for big change management projects, you'd have a benchmarking team. So be identifying the aim, what the project's about, who's the project going to impact in terms of the stakeholders, and what are going to be the expected benefits. Because if you can't identify with clarity what the expected benefits are likely to be, then you shouldn't be undertaking the project itself. So the terms of reference, then you have the review stage. The review stage is really making sure the benchmarking project is focused on the right area and probing into a bit more detail about the current challenges and opportunities you're facing. Because the more detail we know about those, then the more specific we can be when we do the benchmarking, because we want to make sure when we do the benchmarking and learning from other organizations, we're addressing precisely those areas where your organization is weak, or you have challenges, or where you think there could be major improvements. So the review stage is very important. It's to understand precisely the current situation. You then move on to the acquire stage, where you're learning from best practices from other organizations, and which can be through multiple ways. It can be a little desktop research, it can be visiting other organizations, it can be through surveys. And then once you've acquired that information, those better practices, you can deploy them and evaluate the outcomes from the project. Obviously, it's much more than I've just summarized, and I'll show you a bit more of the methodology in a second. But we call it trade because essentially, when you do a benchmarking project, you are working with other organizations. You are formulating relationships with other organizations to learn about their best practices. So it's called trade because really we're focusing on exchange of information and best practices with other organizations to improve the performance of processes, goods, and services. So always bear that in mind. Benchmarking partners are crucial to the success of projects. And often you've got to go back to them again and again and again to find more clarity, more understanding about what they've done and how it can be applied by your organization. And you also want to maintain that relationship because you might want to use them again for another project. And also you need to offer them the opportunity to learn from you as well. So this is why it is indeed a partnership. The reason why benchmarking is the most powerful change management technique, if you know a more powerful one, let me know, is because it involves, it understands change management. And helps you to manage the change. You can get in consultants. Consultants often know the best practices because they're visiting different organizations all the time and worked with them, so they're very knowledgeable. So consultants usually know some at least good to best practices. And if you get them into your organization to implement a solution, once that consultant goes, then often that knowledge is lost or it depletes over time. So benchmarking is all about building the capability of your own people so that when you find the best practices, they're implemented by your people. Everybody agrees that these are the right solutions, so there's no resistance to change. And then because you're all involved in that whole process, you're building up all those competencies, capabilities, so it's more easy to sustain those best practices in the long term. So benchmarking projects take the project team and stakeholders of the process on a learning journey to explore new ways of doing things so that together they create new solutions and best practices. So benchmarking is not just about the project team. The project team should be engaging with all the process owners, the internal suppliers, the external internal customers, internal suppliers, and external customers and external suppliers, if relevant to the project, so that they're all involved in this project. And the reason for that is because, as I say, to make sure there's no resistance to change, but to also pick their minds, to talk to them, to find out what do they think is going wrong, what would be their potential solutions. So you're taking all of them on the learning journey through the trade methodology. This is the way you have successful projects. So benchmarking involves your benchmarking team and all key stakeholders in the change process, seeking their input and ideas. And there's a Confucius saying, which is, tell me, I may forget, show me, I may remember, involve me, and I will understand. This is why you're involving not only your team, but your stakeholders, because there's no point doing a project, which I've seen many, many times, doing a project, finding best practices, and then you go to your senior management team and they don't take your recommendations on board because they've not been engaged in the project from the start to the finish. So you don't want benchmarking units working totally independently of the people who want the solutions. The people with the technical competencies or the problems inside the organization should be part of a benchmarking team. The benchmarking unit, if you have one, they should be facilitating the benchmarking process, but they should not be doing the benchmarking. So note to benchmarking by benchmarking units. Benchmarking units should be facilitating the process. So benchmarking, this is why it's the most powerful approach there is, because it provides a winning formula. It's bringing together all the stakeholders' knowledge, experience, and creativity, adding to that best practices that are found from other organizations. And together they make next practices, true innovations, breakthrough improvements. A typical benchmarking project generates between 60 to 120 ideas of best practices. This is looking back at all the projects we've helped to facilitate over the last 20 years. So if you're doing benchmarking projects and you only come up with 3 or 4 best practices, you're doing the project wrong. So when you bring together all those ideas and practices, you then need to filter them and decide what are you going to implement. You can't implement everything. So again, you've got to consider each potential idea or practice from a perspective. If we implemented that, how much resource would it take? How much impact would it deliver? And then perhaps from those 60 to 120 ideas, you might implement 20 to 30. Some of them might be quick wins, something easy to implement, while other ones might be bigger changes to the organization. But once you combine them all together, you have major breakthrough improvements. So actually, very rarely do you find one best practice in another organization that's going to totally radically change your own organization. Normally, it's the combination of all these smaller changes will produce the major step forward. And this is actually called the principle of marginal gains, which is now often used and referred to a lot in sports. So if you look at the success of the British cycling team, going back to Beijing's Olympics, they started introducing this concept of the principle of marginal gains, where they looked at any way of trying to improve the cycling team's performance, whether it's in terms of the technology, whether it's in terms of how they train the athletes, whether it's in terms of the foods the athletes eat. And so every small potential improvement was looked at. And once they're combined together, they produce these large gains for the cycling team, which I think for every Olympics since Beijing, they've won, at least 5 gold medals or something like that. And so this equally applies to benchmarking. So the trade methodology, as I've said, provides a systematic approach to learning from other organizations. It consists of those 5 major stages. Underneath each stage are steps. So this is why it's very easy to follow if you've not done benchmarking before, because you have the stage, you have the steps, and then actually there's quite in-depth guidelines. We produce a training manual, and it's very descriptive in terms of what you need to do for each step. And not only that, there's a trade project management system using Excel spreadsheets with lots of tools, techniques you can use throughout the benchmarking project. So, for instance, for the review stage of trade, you're often using techniques like SWOT analysis, fishbone analysis, gap analysis to understand the current situation. And when you go to the acquire stage of trade, learning from other organizations, you'll have best practice search forms, how you're going to collate information from the internet. And then you need to develop site visit questions if you're going to visit another organization. So we have lots of template forms to help organizations through each stage and step. So just to give you an idea of how much is being used from the government's perspective, we've also worked a lot with the private sector in the UAE, but over the past 7 or 8 years, we've undertaken a lot of projects in the Dubai government. You can see many of them here, very diverse projects. So benchmarking can be in anything, whether it's people happiness, whether it's trying to improve a particular process, whether it's trying to make sure that Dubai is the safest place in the world to have a heart attack, whether it's improving airport security. It's a whole raft of projects here where benchmarking has been used. All of these projects have been written up in books. So there's a case study in every single project here, and it's freely available as well, not only to the BPR.com members, but non-members too. So if you go to our website, you'll be able to find these books somewhere on our free pages. So these are some of the books that have been written where we have the case studies of those particular projects. On average for these projects, they generated almost I don't know how much is that in dirhams, quite a lot anyway. So at least $4 million US dollars in savings or revenue for the government for every single project on average. So the projects would improve the government entity in terms of efficiency, effectiveness, or it might be improving the service as well, which obviously the citizens will benefit. It might be saving the citizens time, especially when you're talking about digital transformation. Therefore, less need now for citizens to go and visit government offices. They can do things a lot quicker from their home. So that, in fact, is making that's a big saving in terms of society as a whole. And so this is why when you do a benchmarking project, you need to think what would be the expected benefits from a government perspective. It's financial savings for them directly, or savings for their society as a whole. Again, that concept could be certainly for the private sector. You can readily think of financial benefits for your own organization, but also often you do want to have that impact as well on your supply chain and your customers, and so you can factor that into each project too. You can also see here we had a project learning from best practices to manage the COVID pandemic, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. This year we've started new projects again. Actually, we started late last year in September. So these projects are actively running across the Dubai government at the moment, utilizing the trade methodology. You can see the top one here called Dubai Can Initiative. It'd be worthwhile you go to the Dubai Can website. We won't mention the trade methodology, but we are working to improve how the Department of Economy and Tourism is helping the hospitality sector to move away from single-use plastic water bottles. So the focus here is on the hospitality sector, working with all hotels to move away. And to do that, they're learning from the best hotel chains, not only in the UAE, but worldwide, and how other cities have addressed this. And it's interesting because not only will this project directly help the hospitality industry, there'll be knock-on effects to the whole of Dubai, hopefully in terms of public awareness as well, in terms of that we should not be using plastic water bottles, or at least times as possible when we're drinking our water. So it's also good because the project is saying that we want Dubai to be the benchmark. We want Dubai to become the best in terms of how it's managed to reduce the use of water bottles. You can see also here many other exciting projects. You've also got another one related to sustainability by DEWA, which is looking at helping every individual in Dubai, whether it's commercial business or a person in their own home, to reduce their electricity consumption. So there's a whole last list of best practices that will be hopefully implemented as a result of this project to help you all. Anyway, you can have a look at some of those later on. So when we do the benchmarking project, it's important they're done properly. So there is a certification scheme around that. We want people to be trained properly. We want to make sure that once the projects are done, they have been implemented properly. So we assess, and not only the people have been trained, but also how well the projects have been undertaken. And people can become masters in benchmarking, masters in trade, if they've completed 2 benchmarking projects and at least one of them has been recognized as a 5-star project or above. Quick overview of just one project. Because of the success of these benchmarking projects across the Dubai government, then the Dubai Government Excellence Programme was tasked with undertaking a benchmarking project in response to the COVID pandemic in early 2020. And obviously COVID, it's very fast moving virus, and it's very, every week the whole situation was changing on what needs to be done. So it's constantly learning. And it was thought that to help to address this, that there should be a benchmarking team set up of people that had previously been involved in 7-star best practices. Therefore, benchmarking masters from the Dubai government to be involved in this project and to look at how to help to improve the government's response to managing and recovering from the pandemic. So actually, a team was brought together. A team, first of all, of just, I think, 5 to 10 people, and you go through the terms of reference stage of the project first of all, and it was quite evident very early on the start of the project that that team that we had was too small, because once you look at what needs to be tackled in terms of the terms of reference, we identified that there were 5 critical areas that needed to be considered. One was crisis management, another one was the health of the people, another one was food security and supply chain, another was the economy, how could we keep the economy going, and the other one was societal behavior, how do we get people to behave in a responsible way so the virus is not spread too quickly. So we decided that there should actually be 5 project teams set up, focused on each of those areas. And then the project needed to be a fast project. We're producing major results in a couple of months, but always producing some quick wins, quick information that could be fed back to the Crisis and Disaster Management Committee as we proceeded through the project. So the review stage was reviewing the current situation, what was the current strategy of the UAE and Dubai in terms of responding to the pandemic, looking at the strengths and weaknesses, looking at what could be done, what was working, what was not working. This is a fishbone analysis from the crisis leadership team. So we had 5 teams, remember, one was on crisis leadership and or crisis management. And you can see here that this is a fishbone diagram saying that in the future, we want to have a world-class effective crisis management approach, and saying that in terms of where we are now, we need to look at how we're managing our data, how we're doing our media control, how we are leading with respect to the crisis, looking at our communication channels, and look at future foresight and readiness so we can handle an event like this more effectively in the future. So this is all about studying the current situation, and they did a gap analysis and then could identify what exactly they wanted to learn from other countries around the world, and then move into the acquire stage of trade, do a lot of desktop research. So again, this is for the pillar crisis management. This is showing where they're searching for best practices in crisis leadership. This is what's called the best practice search form, which helps you to focus in on what you need to learn when you do a benchmarking project. And you can see here, they break down the search into more detail. So this is on crisis leadership they're looking at. And a search includes which cities, states, and countries have shown leadership in managing this crisis, etc. So it's framing the research and making sure then you're going to get good results. And actually, some of the best practices did come from New Zealand. This is just one example here in terms of the leadership within New Zealand, particularly Jacinda Ardern, our Prime Minister at the time, was a very good communicator, which was helping New Zealand stay safe in many respects. And we had one of the lowest number of death rates around the world. So this is just an example here showing how some of the learning was from New Zealand, but there's learning from all around the world. We've not got enough time here to go into all of that. And so that information then was fed back to the Crisis Management Committee, who would then think about what could be deployed and then ultimately have successful outcomes for the UAE, which there were. The UAE was recognised one of the safest countries in the world, particularly as well through its testing approach. Separately, actually, to that project, there was another project through CIHA who were also using the trade methodology. And they did benchmarking against Korea in terms of how they were introducing screening centres to test whether people had COVID or not. And because they had used benchmarking, they adapted and improved on the Korean model. So while the Korean model took 5 steps, the UAE model took 2 steps. While it took 10 minutes to test a client, it just took 3 minutes in the UAE, etc., etc. So the UAE became a leader in testing everybody, whether they had COVID or not, and managed to introduce 18 drive-through screening hubs across the Emirates within 15 days, which is a phenomenal achievement. This case study for CIHA was actually also presented in the International Best Practice Competition, which we'll talk about later on, and is accessible on the bpr.com website resource if you're interested in it. So if you're interested in learning about trade and the methodology, we do have training courses, virtual training courses you can find on our website. And also we hope to resume soon public training courses within Dubai. We used to run them all the time through the Dubai Quality Group. So we're in discussions now to restart those too. So now so you have the systematic approach to benchmarking, but also what we try to do for COA is encourage organizations to share what they're good at, because this information is good for the benchmarking projects. They know who to learn from. So we run the International Best Practice Competition. We will be closing for entry soon. We might be able to extend that a little bit for those attending this session, but our deadline is the 6th of May. And this is where we encourage organizations to share any practice or process that they believe they're good at. It's done for 2 reasons. One is to recognize the good work of organizations. But secondly, we want this to be a fun event where you're not just entering this event for recognition. You're entering this event because you also believe in a philosophy that we should all be sharing and learning together for the betterment of society. And so when you participate in this event, it's quite unusual, is that you submit a written application, but also you give a presentation, an 8-minute presentation. It's like a little talent contest, really. So you give an 8-minute presentation on your best practice, and then you not only give that presentation where you'll then have Q&A from judges, but all other participants can listen to your presentation and learn from it. So we generally have between 50 to 120 practices which are presented, where they go to reach the presentation stage each year, and you could actually listen to all of them. So it's a great opportunity for learning and a great opportunity for identifying who perhaps could be a benchmarking partner. So you can see here the slides of sort of areas where you can have best practice. You can have best practice in any part of your organization. We just categorize them later on into those categories. So final call for entries closes on the 6th of May. And we thank the Dubai Quality Group as well for promoting and being a partner of the International Best Practice Competition. So as I've said, organisations submit an entry form, and then the presentations are videoed and played, and there's a live Q&A session. So huge opportunity here, great fun. Each best practice is assessed on a 7-star system. If your practice is assessed as 5 stars and above, it means the judges consider your best practice to be of international significance, of international interest. 4 stars is also a fantastic achievement. 4 stars means it's of national interest, therefore will be interest to many organisations in the UAE. 3 stars also is good. It means you're progressing. Maybe the following year you'll reach 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 star. And then those best practices are assessed in terms of those 6 assessment criteria you can see in this slide: clarity of the best practice, level of deployment, level of innovation. We're looking at performance results. We're looking for other best practice information, evidence that you've done some benchmarking, for instance, and that practice is being continually reviewed and refined. So if you think back to the definition of best practice by Dr. Robert Camp, again, this is aligned to that. And all participants get verified badges, which can display in social media, and also certificates, etc. And we have lots of judges from all around the world to assess those best practices. And these are just examples of some winners from previous years. We do get a lot of entries from the UAE, but we get a lot of entries as well from well, we get entries usually between about 15 countries, 15 to 20 countries each year. Majority, I guess, would be from the Middle East. We also get normally quite a lot from the Philippines, Singapore. It varies sometimes year by year. So even we had lots from Costa Rica a couple of years ago. Finally, talk about the best practice improvement resource, because this is a membership benefit to Dubai Quality Group partners. And this resource has changed over time. It's changed for the better. It's more user friendly and quicker to find information that you want. But we're also predominantly now becoming a resource for the International Best Practice Competition, where we host all the best practices that we found through the International Best Practice Competition over the years. We're finding that people now, they want to learn often from visual stimuli. They want to learn from videos. This is why we have just 8-minute video presentations, because that's how long somebody can concentrate on a best practice or learning information. And all those sort of 8-minute videos then become part of the BPR.com, so you can learn from them. We have lots of other information as well, case studies, written information, but more and more moving towards a video format. You can search the website from the perspective of different business excellence models. So even if you're using Dubai Government Excellence Model or the EFQM Excellence Model, you can search for best practices with respect to the various criteria. You can do a search for benchmarking, and you'll find, for instance, last year's Global Benchmarking Award winners were Dubai Municipality. So you can watch a video of how they've implemented benchmarking inside their organization. And again, they're a user of the trade best practice benchmarking methodology. And you can watch all different presentations. As I say, we've got many from the United Arab Emirates, but also many from elsewhere around the world. So you can just see some of them from the UAE and Dubai shown on this slide here. So a great resource for you to look at. I'm just going to end this presentation. I'm going to play a video now, which will share with you the information on the BPR.com, and then after I'll open for Q&A. So I know I've raced through a lot of information, but we are already coming up to 11 a.m. So this is about 1.5 minute video, and then we have Q&A. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. You see Doa there, she looks exactly the same as her other picture. And there we see her live. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Robin, for this informative webinar, and thank you for our audience, the 45 people who attended today. We would love to announce that this webinar was still live streaming on our YouTube channels, and it will be recording and send the recording link to all the people who registered in this webinar. I will leave Dr. Robin to answer the Q&A. We have a lot of questions has been dropped in the section of the Q&A. The first question from Ms. Mariam. She's asking, how can benchmarking be effectively utilized to drive performance improvement and foster innovation within an organization?
Well, I thought I'd answered that already, really. That was the point. As I say, I mean, it's first of all, you've got to get the commitment to do benchmarking. That's why I say you've got to have the conversations with your senior leadership team and ask whether they're interested in best practices, which certainly they should be. And then you need to think about, okay, if we're going to do benchmarking, how are we going to do it? And obviously you want to do benchmarking on those major areas where you have challenges. And so you need to think about sort of what process you'll have in place to actually do that. I do recommend you do have a benchmarking unit in place or some structure like that, but I wouldn't call it a benchmarking unit. I would call it a benchmarking coordinating unit or a benchmarking facilitation unit to show that your role is to make sure that benchmarking is happening inside your organization. Therefore, a benchmarking coordinating unit will be making sure that benchmarking projects are set up to address those key challenges your organization is facing, whether you identify those challenges through your strategy or whether you identify your challenges because you know you've just got some major pain points. And then also that benchmarking coordinating unit would make sure that when you set up benchmarking teams to focus on those areas, you have people who are trained on inside those teams and on what is benchmarking, how to do it. You could have somebody from the benchmarking facilitation or coordinating unit sitting inside each benchmarking team, facilitating each project. But you certainly need some people who sort of build up their competencies on how to do benchmarking. And yeah, you just need then a couple of projects, and which is successful. And if you follow something like the trade methodology, they will be successful if you're following it prescriptively. Then once they're successful and you can show the benefits, it's so important to show benefits and be measuring your performance. Once you can demonstrate how much those projects have added value to your organization, then you'll get more commitment from your senior leaders to do more benchmarking projects.
Thank you, Doctor. The next question is asking if the webinar is recording. Yes, the webinar is recording. And as I mentioned a while ago, it will be shared to all the people who registered and attended the webinar by email. We have a question from Mr. Wa'il Youssef asking, what do you think about the future of benchmarking in the era of the AI, the artificial intelligence?
That's a good question. And I wish well, Yusuf could answer the question for me on my behalf. It's certainly changing. I think always, you know, in terms of accessing information and trying to find out what is potentially a best practice, then you can potentially ask, you know, Chat GPT for some ideas and get ideas from AI. But I still think there's always going to be that need for, because of the change management aspect, there's still the need for people here, for people to go on a learning journey, for people to fully evaluate what other organizations are doing. Maybe some of that process can be sped up, or potentially through AI might be able to help with some of the analysis of some of the findings. But you know, I don't know. We need to watch this space. This is I'm chairman of the Global Benchmarking Network, and we are going to be starting soon a project actually just to identify or look at this particular question. raised by Wales. So he'd be welcome to join that research team as well if you would like to.
Actually, it's a challenge question for everything now.
Yes. Yes.
What is the future for us
Yes.
with the AI?
Yes.
There is a question as well. They are asking if you are offering benchmarking courses in Dubai, Dr. Robin.
Well, yes, we will be through the Dubai Quality Group. So that's when we just we've been discussing that the last few months, and really this webinar was a kickstart to make that happen. So we used to offer them all the time, but since the pandemic, that's slipped. So you can, if you want, there is virtual training you can access through our website, but obviously face to face is much better. And I'm often in this region, so this is my really second home. So face to face, I think you're always going to get far richer learning. So we'll have public courses, but also the DQG could also range in-house as well, training if it's for more staff inside your organization.
Yes, 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 of course. We would love to receive any inquiry about customizing or organizing in-house benchmarking training for the people who are involved in, and interested to know more and more about the benchmarking, how to execute it, the fundamental, the everything through Dr. Robin. We would love to receive these inquiries via the email, and we will arrange it further. I'm waiting also if there is any questions, we'll be adding to our question list right now. If the audience would love to add more questions, we're still here. We still have a couple of minutes. There is a question also from Mr. Wael. With pleasure, I accept your invitation. He's, yeah, he replied back to you, Doctor. He would love to join your team.
Okay, fantastic. There we are. He needs to drop me an email then. Okay.
Yeah. If Dr. Robin would love to drop the email address of you in the chat area, that would be great. So anyone want to contact you directly?
Yeah, I mean, you'll be able to see anyway from my slides. I think my last slide as
Okay,
well gives my
no
email
problem.
address too.
Yeah.
I'm
Otherwise,
not sure I can put anything in the chat, can I myself?
Yeah,
No, I
yeah,
can.
yeah, you
Oh, yeah.
can. Sure. Anyway, we will drop the email for the audience after this webinar, including the link of the recording and also the contact details of Dr. Robin, so you can reach him easily. Yes. Okay. So far, there is no more question. Thank you so much for attending our webinar today. We are happy to have you all and expecting to attend our upcoming webinars as well. Thank you, Dr. Robin, for your time. And also we will be expecting more webinars about topic related to the benchmarking to feed our audience with the latest best practice related to this field. Thank you so much for your time today.
No, thank you. Thank you as well for the great work at Dubai Quality Groups promoting all of this area and keeping it live. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a nice day, everybody. Thank you.